Hello, everyone. My name is Emma Yang. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm a senior in high school from New York City, and I'm also the founder of Timeless. Today, I'd like to share with you the story of my entrepreneurship journey. A bit about me. I was born in Hong Kong. I love cats and everything about cats. I love food, particularly the Southeast Asian food I grew up eating. But above all, I love to code. I began coding when I was 6 years old. I distinctly remember sitting down on the couch on afternoons after school, holding a heavy laptop and playing around with animation on Scratch. So as Avi mentioned, Scratch is a tool that was released by MIT when I was around 5 years old that uses block-by-block programming to teach kids about coding. It was full of fun sprites that you could rotate and change their colors by dragging blocks of code onto your screen, and which would snap together with a satisfying sound effect I still remember. I would bounce cartoon cats around the edges of the screen before I began looking into other users' projects published online and slowly but surely figured out more complex structures. I was amazed by the extraordinary range of things a couple of blocks of code could create, something unique that I could share with the rest of the world. About a year later, games and animations turned into mobile apps when I would haul said heavy laptop with me in my parents' mesh laptop bag and take the bus to MIT App Inventor classes. I was living in Hong Kong at the time, and kids coding schools were a pretty novel concept to the city back then. The classes were run by First Code Academy, one of the first coding schools in Hong Kong, founded by a female entrepreneur who had just returned from Silicon Valley. We went through the usual series of loops, logic, and user interfaces, but still in the block-by-block environment, now for Android apps. That was the first time I learned about developing mobile apps, a significant part of my projects now. It was also the first time I was one of the youngest in the room, starting young. And it was the first time I was probably one of the few girls in the room, if not the only one. My interest in coding and eventually computer science in general continued to expand. I took online classes in HTML and CSS and learned Java with books about the object-oriented language, encapsulation, and methods. Then, around 7 years ago, I moved from Hong Kong to the US. In the midst of moving from some of the mildest 60-degree winters in Asia to the shockingly polar vortex cold winters of the Northeast, I found the Technovation Challenge, a global technology entrepreneurship challenge for girls. My best friend and I decided to enter the challenge. We wanted to tackle concussions, which was and is a huge issue in contact sports. We went to the drawing board and decided to develop an app called Concussion Checker, which would offer an easy way to evaluate a head injury for the possibility of a concussion. We worked tirelessly over spring break and completed a working prototype and entered into the challenge. And here is our prototype of Concussion Checker, which helps teachers or coaches assess whether a player has a concussion using a set of diagnostic questions, and if needed, helps to locate the nearest doctors or medical facilities. Developing this app and the accompanying business plan was my springboard into a whole different level of technology, using technology to help my community and to solve real-world problems we face today. We were fortunate enough to make it all the way to San Francisco over the summer after 6th grade and to win second place globally. That was the first time I was in a room full of girls, all passionate about using technology for good. I began increasingly to see technology not just as the blocks of code or an animated game, but as a strength, as a tool, and as a platform for empowering a middle school girl who couldn't write sentences of a sensible length, but still wanted to change something, maybe even the world. I realized that even though I was 11, with the range of platforms and tools out there, I could create apps, products with meaningful functionalities to impact and benefit people around the world. So Concussion Checker was developed in App Inventor. After Technovation, I wanted to learn how to create apps for iOS, the platform that runs iPhones and iPads. I was 11 years old when I tried to enroll into the Flatiron School's iOS class for high school students. I was a 7th grade student at the time, and they thought I was too young, so they had to interview me to make sure I was mature enough to take the class. But luckily, I did pass, and here I was learning how to code in iOS. I had an amazing teacher who encouraged us to use our knowledge at the end of the course to develop apps for a social purpose. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, an app that could positively impact millions of lives. And that purpose was the beginning of the journey I have been on for the past 5 years as the founder of Timeless. When I lived in Hong Kong, my grandma would take care of me when my parents were at work. She would read to me and took me out to places. We spent a lot of time together. My mom always said that I took so many things after my grandma, good things to be exact. The way I talk, the way I carry myself. I am a little shadow of my grandma. When I was around 7 or 8 years old, my grandma was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, a chronic neurodegenerative disease. Alzheimer's affects everyone differently. For my grandma, the biggest impact on our family is how difficult it is now to have a conversation with her. She's often asking us what day it is or what time it is. When we're on the phone with her, she's always asking how we are, whether I've eaten yet, over and over again. In our 10-minute conversation together, my grandma would have only asked me around 3 or 4 different questions. And because of that, it's difficult to talk to her about school and other things that I want to tell her about that we used to be able to, and increasingly so as the disease progresses. My grandmother is not alone. There are nearly 50 million people worldwide who suffer from Alzheimer's disease. By 2050, that number is expected to rise to 130 million. Prevalence of the disease is on the rise, but there is no cure. Like my grandma, Alzheimer's patients have difficulties remembering events, recognizing family and friends, taking new information, and often have difficulties with questions, repeating questions. And so my grandmother still lives in Hong Kong, and the distance doesn't make it any easier for us to connect with her. We call her often, but having a conversation is still difficult, especially now we're not talking face to face. We've tried to cope by setting up visual aids around the house that she can regularly see and that can remind her about information that she has difficulty remembering. We have this whiteboard that her caregiver updates regularly, set up in our living room, that has the date, her home address, my dad's phone number, and appointments that are coming up. So what you see on the right side here is the whiteboard that we put up for my grandma. It has my dad's phone number on the top. In the middle is the phone number of someone she needs to visit in their respective address. And Sunday is written at the bottom in Chinese. We also have an iPad that she uses to look at pictures of my parents and me regularly to help remind her of us. She uses these often, but she still gets confused about everyday things and needs constant reminders. So as time went by, my family and I started to wonder, is there a simple mobile app that could help my grandmother and other Alzheimer's patients or dementia patients to remember events, stay engaged with friends and family, and to help cope with the daily challenges of Alzheimer's? So my family hunted extensively for such an app that we were sure must exist. But we came away disappointed because, in fact, it didn't. There are many tools in the market, but none of them help patients improve their daily lives. We also found that there are very few apps developed for the elderly in general, due to the stereotype that old people cannot use technology. They are the underserved demographic. It was around that time that I was learning how to code in iOS that I began exploring the idea of building an app that could help my grandmother stay connected with my family. I had never built an app from scratch before, but I slowly navigated the process of learning how to use Sketch to design a user interface and prototyping my designs in tools like Flinto. And after Timeless started to gain attention from the Alzheimer's community online, I saw the app materializing into something that not only my family could benefit from, but possibly even people around the world. People started reaching out on Facebook and through my website, asking about when Timeless would be released, and talking about loved ones who could really benefit from an app like Timeless. Timeless was something that was larger than my family. It could impact people and families just like mine around the world. At this point, I realized that I would need more guidance on how to bring my idea to the real world. I cold emailed CTOs of facial recognition companies, UI/UX designers, and Alzheimer's specialists, asking them for mentorship and advice. Few of them replied, but those who did have become an integral part of Timeless's team. Over the past 5 years, I've worked with a UI/UX designer who has generously been working with me pro bono to ensure that Timeless is as easy to use and intuitive as possible. I've worked with an Alzheimer's specialist who I've worked with to assess what Alzheimer's patients need and could benefit from in an app like Timeless. I've worked with a CTO of a startup in Miami called Kairos, which provides the facial recognition technology behind Timeless. They have all helped me tremendously in building Timeless into what it is today. After building out a fully working prototype of Timeless, I reached out to some VCs, venture capitalists, who were focused on funding startups with female founders and young founders with no success. Fundraising was, and still is, one of the greatest challenges of being a young founder. It's one thing to have an idea you're passionate about, but it's another thing to convince another person why they should be passionate about it too. Passionate enough to give you the funds to turn your idea into a reality. All the while being a young girl with no business experience and no work experience whatsoever. Fundraising and rejection is also where I learned the most, though, from Timeless. I learned that it isn't just about one person or one idea that makes a successful startup, however you choose to define success. It's about the combination of the person and the idea and about storytelling, telling the narrative about your startup, about the story that inspires others to act on your idea. So I took a piece of advice I'd gotten from pitching at these VCs and decided to run a crowdfunding campaign to raise funds so I could start Timeless's development. We ran an Indiegogo campaign in January of 2018 and raised $10,000 from more than 100 backers. And a few months after that, Timeless hit a major milestone. Timeless won the $50,000 grand prize of the Women's Startup Challenge, hosted by Women Who Tech and Google in New York. It was wonderful to be named the youngest recipient of the award ever. But what is more important is the fact that among all of the amazing founders who competed that night, a 14-year-old was recognized and given the opportunity to show the world that she can. Because of the prize, Timeless was now fully funded and an officially incorporated startup. Timeless Innovations LLC was born, a huge milestone after 2 years of hard work. So what is Timeless? Timeless is a first-of-its-kind mobile app that empowers Alzheimer's patients, their loved ones, and their caregivers to stay connected and engage with each other to address the daily challenges of coping with the illness. Timeless has a few core functions that I'll walk you through. Updates, which is the first one on the screen, helps patients stay engaged with loved ones by showing a stream of photos sent by family and friends. The faces in the photos are tagged with the names and relationship of the patient, of the person in the photo to the patient by artificial intelligence-based facial recognition technology to help stimulate the patient's memory. Today simplifies daily information and events to help the patient manage their daily lives. Contacts is a picture phone book that allows the patient to contact loved ones at the touch of a button. And then the most unique function of the app is Identify, where the patient can take a photo of a face in front of them, whether that's a face in real life or in a photo that they have, and Timeless will tell them who it is using the same facial recognition technology. So where is Timeless today? After Timeless was fully funded, I worked with my advisors on a complete redesign of Timeless to make it even more simple, intuitive, and elegant than the prototype that I had built at the beginning of my journey. It was a long road working out the nitty-gritty of creating a smoothly running app. Surprisingly, it's not the high-level things that that are a challenge, but you can realize that some of the smallest details can get tangled up and pose some of the trickiest challenges. A pile of revisions and iterations later, we soft launched Timeless on the App Store in May 2019, a year after Timeless was fully funded. After more iteration, we launched Timeless globally in December 2019, and I've been continuing to improve Timeless and to expand its reach ever since. My highest priority after the December launch was to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. That meant ensuring that Timeless wasn't just available to English-speaking members of the Alzheimer's community, but also to the international communities, both in the US and worldwide, who had also given Timeless such a great response throughout the process. So last August, I released a translation of Timeless into both simplified and traditional Chinese. And a month ago in February, I released Timeless's translation into Spanish for both Latin America and Spain. We've reached thousands of Alzheimer's patients, caregivers, families, and friends so far, and it's growing every day. So there are 4 lessons that I hope that you'll take away from my journey. First, just get started. My journey has given me unthinkable opportunities to travel around the world, sharing my story and using my voice to encourage more girls and young people to pursue their passions. But I don't think that any particular moment was a definitive beginning to this journey. I had no aha moment sitting on my grandma's couch on a hot afternoon in Hong Kong, making a game, or sitting in an auditorium listening to teams of girls from across the world pitching their solutions to social injustice. None of these moments gave me an awakening revelation that I had to forge a path for myself to create something that was meaningful to me and hopefully to millions around the world. My journey may have started when I saw myself as the youngest in the room, or the only girl in the room, or the only computer science geek in the room. I choose to think of it as a lot of small beginnings that collectively put me on this amazing journey. Second, seek mentorship. My advisors and mentors throughout the process of building Timeless have and remain one of my greatest resources and the reason why Timeless exists today. Third, learning from challenges and setbacks. Illnesses like Alzheimer's often make us feel powerless. Rejection often makes us feel powerless. But it was the thought of seeing how powerless patients like my grandmother can often be, and how powerless we feel when we know we could do nothing to help her get better, that inspired me to create Timeless. And it was rejection that led me to turn to crowdfunding and the dozens of pitch competitions I submitted to before Timeless became a funded startup. Fourth, iterate on your ideas as many times as it takes so you can serve your audience as best as possible. And finally, my experience tells me that anyone at any age or of any gender can make a difference if we are determined to do so. I was 12 years old when I began building Timeless. People often asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. Today, my answer is very simple. My dream is to bring the power and the potential of emerging technologies to solve pressing real-world problems and to ensure that technology is accessible to the demographics currently underserved to it, like the elderly. You don't have to be a politician or a doctor to affect change in the world. And don't let your gender be a barrier to pursuing your purpose. Because when you're driven to solve a problem for your community, your mission and your purpose drive groundbreaking ideas. That might be your new beginning. Thank you so much. All right, so I think we're moving to the Q&A section now. So the first question is, what short stories do you write? So a lot of the short stories that I have published online, and one of them, the blogs that I published on is called Quiet Diaries. I would really recommend that you check it out. It was created as a space for introverts to kind of share their stories and their writing. I identify as an extroverted introvert, and so I thought that it was really fitting. And so a lot of the short stories that I wrote at the time were based on actually English assignments from school. One of my favorite ones that's published there is called The Fall of the Cat, which is about this cat that's basically balanced in a swing in the middle of the room, and this little girl that's kind of rushing in and out during that time while this cat is just really peacefully sitting there. And, it was inspired by my love of cats, and that was one of my favorite short stories. So I think, I don't know if there's a particular theme of the stories I write, but I really do like, creative writing assignments from school and really growing those writings from there. Next question would be, what's it like to have employees who are twice your age? So my advisors aren't exactly my employees. They're people that I kind of consult with and, talk to from time to time to get their advice and consult them on questions I have. I think that the age part is something that I try not to think about. And I honestly don't think that, it should be that relevant because, we think about experience as age, but then I think that experience comes in many forms, not just having, lived a certain amount of time. I think, I have a personal experience that informs what I do, which is growing up with my grandmother and seeing how Alzheimer's has affected my grandmother firsthand. That's an experience that I bring to the table when I'm being, as the founder of Timeless. But I think, what I really look for is what are my advisors bringing to the table as well? And what kind of help do I need because of the things that I don't know yet because I haven't experienced them? And what kind of questions can I then pose to those advisors to make sure that I'm getting the best product out as possible and helping as many people and as well as possible? So I think I don't really think about, having them be, older than me or, this and that. I think it's really about, how am I consulting with them? What do they bring to the table? And how are they helping me to build Timeless to be as, as good of a product as possible? Do you still code now? Absolutely. I code all the time. I'm in high school. And so, I'm working on kind of research projects on the side outside of Timeless. I'm constantly working on Timeless itself. And so I coded the prototype of Timeless myself and also worked with a developer then to kind of code together with him when I worked on getting Timeless on the App Store because, I am a full-time student and I want to make sure I could get Timeless out as quickly as possible. But I absolutely do still code now. And I think I'll be coding for a really long time because it's something I'm super passionate about. I am, thinking of, planning on majoring in computer science in college. And so definitely going to be coding there as well. Next question would be, what advice do you have for young girls who want to pursue a life in coding? I think kind of just get your hands dirty, get immersed in what you find to be, interests you in coding right now, because I think there are so many resources out there online classes you can take, websites that teach you how to code. I think it's really easy for someone to just get started. And I think the best thing you can do is to get started. I think, and in terms of, people who want to pursue it long term, which I hope you do, I would say pick something that you're super passionate about that doesn't necessarily have to be connected to coding. It can be, things like science, biology, medicine, even art. The humanities also have huge connections to computer science now that, technology is so ubiquitous these days. It's everywhere. It touches every part of our lives. I think, the advice I would give would be to pick that thing that you're passionate about and think about how can I apply coding, computer science, computational thinking to that problem and really create something that could help to improve our understanding of something, to help solve a problem that you see in your community or a problem that exists, an open problem that exists in the field that you're interested in. So I would take a look at that and see kind of how you can make your personal contribution to computer science. I think that's the most fulfilling way and interesting way that you can pursue a life in coding. How is your grandmother now? My grandmother still lives in Hong Kong, and we talk to her on the phone all the time. And, I think she's doing pretty well. We have a caregiver who still takes care of her there. It's been difficult to visit her because of COVID for the past year, and we haven't been able to go back to Hong Kong for a while. But hopefully I'll get to fly there and visit her soon when things get a little better. Coming from someone who wants to develop an app, what types of things do you recommend? I'm going to interpret that question as kind of the tools and platforms that I would recommend. I would say it really is about learning by doing. When I took the class at the Flatiron School for coding in iOS, I think, what really helped me learn was just working on a project and taking the questions and the problems and the gaps in learning that I had kind of step by step and piece by piece and question by question. So you get to a certain point and, you're going to see a mountain of different things that you don't know yet because you haven't learned them. And you're going to, figure out how to, just slowly and surely kind of work through every problem that you have. And eventually that builds up into knowledge and skills that you have in, app development. So I would say, start with a project and kind of work your way through, figuring out and debugging all those little challenges that come your way. And then let's see. Is it hard to balance school and managing time? Let's say this is their last question. I would say it's definitely a challenge because, I come from a pretty rigorous school. I try to take, the challenging classes that I can learn the most from. I also do, research projects and extracurriculars at my school outside of Timeless. So I think it's definitely, I'm definitely a very busy student. But, for me, I'm really fortunate that, I found what I like to do really young. Since I was, 6, 7 years old, I knew that coding was something I really enjoyed doing and I was really passionate about. So, and when you find something that you're really passionate about, it doesn't feel like, being bogged down by work. It feels like you're doing things that you really enjoy and that you can occupy your time with that and learn from that. And so I'd say that it's definitely a challenge to balance everything and try to make sure that I'm doing as well as possible in school and also growing Timeless and working on research and all that kind of stuff. But I think, I'm lucky that I really enjoy all of it. And I'm able to say that, it doesn't feel like being busy. It feels like I'm doing things that I really like. And so I hope that you guys can also find something you're that passionate about and to be able to fill your time with it. Because I think, I've had a great high school and school experience with Timeless in school. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this and hope you guys enjoy the rest of Code Art Fest.
Thank you so much, Emma. That was beyond inspirational. We loved having you. Bye.
Thank you.
I just wanted to give a couple of announcements for the teachers in our audience. Willie from Microsoft Teals is going live right now, so please hop on over to the expo and click on the Microsoft Teals booth. You won't want to miss that. For the rest of you, this is a little bit of a break time. Go grab something to eat, get a stretch. And then we hope you also, if you haven't voted yet, be sure to vote for your favorite self-portraits. And please go into the expo and see what some of our STEM partners are, what programs they have to offer. So see you soon. Thank you.